Welcome back to our slideshow images using Photopea instead of Photoshop. And one thing also to mention here is that if we opened it from Google Drive, you could do File Save. It'll do incremental saves to your Photoshop image in your Google Drive, just like as if you were working on Google Docs or something like that. Otherwise, you'd have to be downloading it all the time as a PSD file. So this image here that we're looking at, you can see there's a lot of darks, there's a lot of highlights, there's some oversaturated colors maybe in this guy's jacket here, and there's a lot of shadows too. So we're going to attack the shadows first, and we're going to try to attack the shadows just in his jacket here. Actually, not his face, because it's kind of washed out here. It's a little lighter from the sunlight coming in or from the daylight coming in. So we're just going to try to lighten up this part. We're going to use the quick selection tool. Now, I haven't used this with Photopea, so I'm not sure how this will work, but I'm going to go a little bit smaller with my brush on this. And notice that when we add to a selection, we could use this, and when we subtract from a selection, we could do that. So I'm not sure what it'll come up with, but I want to get these kind of darks on the coat first. So I'm just going to kind of paint this area, and you can see what it did. It picked up a lot of stuff. It picked up everything that's similar to that. And I could use the minus here, and if I want to subtract from the stuff I don't want, I only want that. So I'm going to go around here and just kind of subtract from all the stuff that it was picking up. Again, this would be a little bit easier in Photoshop, but I'll get rid of that, and I'll just kind of make everything come in a little bit. I don't need that. I don't need that. That's kind of what I want. I know it's hard to see the selection, but it's kind of doing that area. I don't even want his head, so I'm going to go around here. I'll get rid of his head from the selection. So it's only selecting the dark parts of his coat there, and that's all I want. And I use that minus sign. Now with Photoshop, you could hold the Option key, I think, to do that, or Alt if you're on Windows, to subtract from a selection. So now I have a selection of his coat. What I want to do there, now I don't have shadows highlight, so I'm going to have to go to Image Adjustments, Levels, and I'm just going to lighten the darks down here on the output level. So I'll take that up to maybe around 20 or something like that, just so it looks a little more even. And that's all I'm going to do there. And then to deselect, I can do Control D or Select, Deselect. And now I have that. So the other thing I'm going to kind of target here is this guy's shirt. So I'm going to zoom into it, and I just want to desaturate it a little bit. So I'll go over here, and I'll try to do it with the quick selection. I'm not sure how this will work, but I'll try it out. So I'm going to make my brush a little smaller. I don't know if you can see my brush there. And I'll just kind of go in here, and it selected most of him, and I don't want his head. So I'm going to use the minus sign and just kind of go over his head. I only want his shirt, and I think that's what it's getting. I can't see it as well as I can see in Photoshop, but it's only getting his shirt right now. And I just want to desaturate that a little bit. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and I would do that through Hue Saturation, just like in Photoshop. And I'll move this over here, and I'll just take the saturation slider and just move it to the left and just kind of tone down that red a little bit. I could even brighten it if I want, but I just want to tone it down so it didn't look so electric red that was in there. His legs are a little bright, but that's okay. So that looks a little bit better, just so it's not so eye-catching. You know, if this was a part of a slideshow, I don't need his shirt looking so bright. So I'm going to hit OK, and then I'll select None by doing Control D, and then I'll zoom out again by doing Control minus. And my image looks okay. Probably needs a little bit of sharpening. I'm also going to check Image Adjustments, Levels. And I can maybe lighten the midtones a little bit overall to brighten up the image. I can even bring this in to kind of even add a little bit more contrast. Now, that would go against a little what I did with his jacket, but it might help the image overall. And again, I don't want to do too much of the highlights over here. If I do, I'd probably want to tone down the highlights using the output. But just mid-tone a little bit will look okay. It'll brighten it up. And I could, do before and after just to see what happens. And that looks better. Again, we're dealing with, actually, I don't want that too much. And that looks a little bit better, because what I don't want is, they took a picture in front of a window again, which isn't the best place to take a picture at this angle. So it's not a great picture, but we're just improving it. That's what we're learning to do with some of these tools here in Photoshop. So we're learning to make the best we can with images that maybe weren't taken in the best environments. So I'll hit OK, and it looks better. I'll zoom out just to see the whole image again, and it looks a lot better than it did when it started. I don't know if you could see the first version here. It was very dark when we first started. So everything looks better here. It's a better image, and that's all we need to do right there. And then for our last image, I've done this in other classes. This is just a real quick, easy one. I'll zoom into this one a little bit more. It's making her teeth white. And the idea is any photos that you take, the teeth may have a tendency to look yellower depending where you're taking them. Now in here, these look really yellow, so we're just going to brighten these up, and I'll show you this technique. I'll usually use the Polygonal Lasso, or you can draw it yourself, or you could even try quick selection. But the quickest thing here, if you're ever taking pictures and you find people's teeth look a little yellow, just take this, go around the teeth, make a selection around the teeth with the Polygonal Lasso. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just don't want to get the lips in here. That's why I'm using this. And I'm going around. And then when you get to the end, you could double click. Or I think click once. I kind of messed that up. So let me do that again. You might have that issue. Sometimes this can be a little tricky. And I'm not sure if this works different than Photoshop or not. I might just have to click on where you started. Might be enough to do that. So let me go and do that one more time. And I'll just click. And clicking didn't work, so I'll double click. All right, there I go. So it's a little tricky. You got to practice that a little bit. And I'll go up here. I have this little thing like it's trying to do another. I'll just click on here, and I'll keep my selection. I'm not going to do any of this. So I'll just keep my selection that's here that you can see. And then I'll do two things. One is I'll use photo filter, and I'll cool it. So I'll do image adjustments, photo filter, and make sure I change that to blue. And you could use other colors, but that should work fine. And I'll hit OK, make sure to hit OK. And then, oh, I'm not on the right layer. I'm looking at this and I'm still on the chest layer. That's why it's not working. So let me go back here and make sure you're on the right layer. And now I'll try that again. And I'll go to Image Adjustments, Photo Filter. And now you can see it's getting orangey there, and then it'll get bluer once I do this. And again, but I apologize for my mistakes. First time I'm kind of really using Photopea. And I'll turn this down a little bit. So you just want it to cool it a little bit, not too much. You can do before and after, and that looks better. They don't have to be perfectly white yet because we can still brighten them. And you don't want to go overboard with the coolness either. You don't want to see any blue in there. You just don't want to see yellow. You just want to counteract the yellow. So I'll hit OK, and then I'll just brighten it a little bit. I'll use Image Adjustments Levels. And I'll just use this to lighten the highlights a little bit on here. And if it ever washes out in between the teeth, you can always darken a little bit. That'll give you a little more contrast if it looks too washed out. But that looks a lot better than it did than the original yellow teeth. And I'll hit OK. And that's all you really have to do. I'll do Select None or Control D. And the teeth look better. And I'll zoom out. And that's all you really have to do for that. And I think also for the chest one and the other one, I forgot to do the sharpening. So I'm going to do filter, last filter on this one, and be very careful that you show your image and you go on that layer, you target the layer. So I'll also do filter, last filter, and sharpen that one up too. So they're all sharpened. They should all be sharpened the same range. So I have these all done. I have kitchen. I'll put these all on now. I have kitchen that I did first. I have the holding sketches, I have the blue painting, I have the ISC pick, I have the chest pick, and I have the Drew Barrymore. So they all kind of had different issues that we had to deal with. And I'm going to turn all these layers on. And I didn't know if I could do this with Photopea, but apparently I can. And this is part of what we wanted to do in Photoshop, is save all these layers at one shot. Now I think it'll save the background as well, but we're going to try to save all these layers at one shot. And the way we're going to do that is in Photoshop, you would go to File Scripts, and they have export layers as files in Photoshop. If I went to Photoshop, I don't know if it'll even show me here, but they have scripts, and they have export layers to files in Photoshop. Well, we're not using Photoshop, we're using Photopea. So since I did everything, let me do a file save, just so I save my Google Drive version of my PSD. Remember, this is the PSD. And then we're going to save these all as separate JPEGs for a slideshow, because that's how we would put it together in a slideshow on a web page. So these will all be separate JPEG images. So instead of doing them one at a time, which we could do, we're going to go File, Export Layers, and it says 7 exportable layers, so it's using all the layers. Sometimes they won't use the one that's not visible, but it looks like it's going to use background. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so I think it's going to do background, but that's okay. And you can get rid of layers that you don't want if you give them a name, I guess with an -E- if you wanted to, if there were layers you didn't want, but we could always just delete it. So I'll uncheck that because it's saying no exportable layers. So now there's 7, and I want to do it as a JPEG. And I'll put my quality up nice and high. Go down a little bit, I guess. Let's see what our instructions say. So here's our instructions. We did all this stuff, hopefully. And it says quality of 12, so that's fine. And it says SS images folder. Now we don't have that right now, because if you're doing it with Photopea, I just gave you like a Photoshop file to work with. But you can save these images as in one shot and then upload them just as a zip file. So what you can do here is, here's our 7 exportable layers. I'll put my quality, it doesn't say 12, it says 100%. We'll just do that. And I'll say export layers. And it makes a folder of all your images. Now if I double click on this, it's going to show up in my downloads, and there's all my images. Now it has background here. You can get rid of that, or you could just leave it in here. And this, now I did this another time, so it would originally just be called assets.zip. But what you could do is just upload this thing, because if you open it up, you can see it has all your JPEG images in there. There they are, all your finished images that we'd use for a slideshow, and they're all finished. And you can just upload this. And as long as you're doing that, you can also share your image in here. So if you go back, I'll close this up since I already did that, and I already saved this. If you went back to your drive, and I'll go back here. Now, if this thing was already saved, what you could do is you could share this. You could just do share and then give me a link so I can actually download that folder. I think I could download it if you share it with me. So if you go to share, you can either enter an email or just get a shareable link here. And then when you get this link, send me this link or put the link in your comments in your My Warren for that. So I have a way to get to your PSD file, and then you can also upload your assets zip file in there so I could see all your slideshow images as well. So that's all you should have to do right now. You can copy this link, put it in your comments, and you can upload your zip assets archive that was created from Photopea. And I'll hit done here, and that's all you have to do for this assignment. So then when you're done in here, you can just get out of here. You could close this up, and it should be updated in your Google Drive. So if I close this, and also I was gonna go through and do this in My Warren, but it looks like My Warren's down right now. And here's my image, and you can see it looks brighter already. So this is the finished image that you can share with me, and then also give me your assets. So that's EX2 Slideshow Images for Computer Graphics 1.